I couldn't even believe I did it. I mean, it's just almost like they could almost make you do whatever they wanted you to do.
It starts with a simple phone call, but could end with the victim losing not just their life savings, but taking their lives. We're talking about the Jamaican lottery scams, a simple con with international reach and devastating consequences. And it's affected just about every state in the United States. But why is the con so efficient? We went to the US to talk to some of those affected. Our story starts with Edna Schmitz in North Dakota. Rifling through old check returns, Edna Schmitz still can't believe her money is all gone.
How could I just, keep taking the money out of my insurance policy and putting it in the bank and writing out a check for $20,000 and $20,000 and $25,000 and I just kept doing it.
Edna is talking about the thousands she sent to a man who called in September 2011. Said his name was Newton Bennett. Said he had news.
He said that he was calling to let me know that I had won $19 million.
To get the millions, she had to pay taxes up front.
Could you go down to the bank and put it in? Have you ever used a money order?
I would have to send a wire transfer for $3,500, and so I did that.
That was the first of 4 years of phone calls. The disguise for a lottery scam web woven all the way from Jamaica to North Dakota on the US-Canada border and trapping plenty of states in between. He was a talker, that Newton Bennett.
He called a lot every day? How many times?
Oh, not every day. Sometimes 2-3 times a week or.
And you said sometimes he would call just to talk.
Yeah.
What would he say? What would he talk about?
Well, he's just wondering how I was doing and, if I was getting everything done that I was supposed to do and stuff like that,
Was he nice?
Yeah, very nice.
Soon he had her convinced. The millions were merely one payment away, then another, then another.
I just decided maybe this was a good deal because I was probably going to get this $19 million, and I was also supposed to get all the money back that I sent in,
He said that?
Yeah, he said that.
Edna Schmitz was slowly sending her life savings to a stranger.
Well, I'm sure it was over $400,000.
It all seems so silly now, but then it was a godsend. Edna had been living alone. Her husband died mere months before. She was worried about her children.
And I thought, well, if I had, all this money, I could give it to the other 3 of my children, at least some of it.
It's a 4-year-old tale for Edna's 4 children. Jeff Schmitz is the second oldest.
I just couldn't believe it when I heard it, and the amount of money. It was just unbelievable.
Was it upsetting?
Yes, very upsetting, yeah. You'd like to just get your hands on these guys, and oh, it's terrible.
Lisa Applet, nee Schmitz, is the baby of the family.
It's just horrible, and people don't realize, people just think, oh yeah, they lost, $500 or they lost $1,000, but they don't think like my mom losing her whole life savings.
Back in 2011, to them there was no Newton.
He said, don't tell anyone.
Yep, that's what he said. Don't tell anybody, not even your children. And I said, well, what's the big deal? Why not tell anybody about it? Well, he said that's their protocol.
Someone at Edna's bank told Jeff. He told Lisa. Lisa lives in Bismarck, North Dakota. She saw us to her mother's home in Harvey.
Hi, Lisa. Hi. I'm Chris.
Hi.
Hi, this is Archie.
Nice to meet you.
And then this is Ivan. So this is us.
Harvey is a 3-hour drive from Bismarck, and in March, not much to see. The tail end of winter in one of the United States' northernmost states means there's very little to tell 1 acre of land from the next. They don't call these the Great Plains for nothing. Farm country, mostly corn and cattle. Well, when winter is gone. For Edna and her late husband, life was farming.
Oh my gosh. I was doing everything there was to do, besides, taking care of the kids, doing the housework, doing everything, plus being out in the field, helping with the cattle.
He doubled up on the railway, so for months she was farming alone.
I never hardly got to ever go anywhere because, there was always so dang much work to do. And my husband, well, toward last he got like about 6 weeks of vacation, off the railroad. Well, he'd take that in August, and we had to try and get everything done before he went back to work. So that was our vacation.
Vacation was work.
Yes, that's what it was. That's for sure.
That was the retirement money. Scammers stole everything but the house.
$100. That's all I had left in the bank at one time. Oh my God.
Little money, but lots of pain.
She had to go on different pills and this and that, and she was just, I'd come over here and she'd just be crying about it, I mean, she's just so upset all the time about it. And
It's very stressful for my mom. She's very depressed, very hard on herself for having done this. It's not like my mom and dad are wealthy millionaires. They worked hard for everything that they had, and she shouldn't have to worry about ever having, she should be able to go and buy whatever she wants.
If it sounds familiar, it's because increasingly it is. Yearly, more and more Americans are telling the tale Edna told us, and there are 3 ways in which she's a typical storyteller. She's a woman over the age of 70, 87 this year to be exact, living alone. Women like Edna are the face of a new crisis. Bob Blancato, National Coordinator of the Elder Justice Coalition.
We find this to be very disturbing. We find the fact that 300,000 people are affected by this in our country, most of them older people, is very scary. And then the financial loss, people lose their life savings on one phone call.
Bob Blancato, National Coordinator of the Elder Justice Coalition. Dr. Doug Shadell is State Director for Washington for the American Association of Retired Persons, AARP.
I would say that they are the most vulnerable people in the United States.
To vulnerable and isolated.
And this meets our profile of the lottery victim, who are isolated, living alone, and they're more open to those phone calls coming in.
To isolated and ill.
They tend to have more illnesses, lower education, less income, and a percentage of them have cognitive impairment like dementia and Alzheimer's.
That brings us to the story of Steve Little. Well, he's actually telling his brother's tale.
I got a call from him, and he said he had gotten an eviction notice. Well, I'm a lawyer. It's no big deal. I'll take care of it. And so I told him I'd be over shortly, and I did. By the time I got there, he had killed himself.
Michael was the textbook older sibling.
And in some ways, he was sort of larger than life. He had lots of friends. Because basically, when he'd walk into a room, he'd sort of take over. He liked telling stories. He liked life. He liked living.
Steve knew something was wrong in June 2015.
I started noticing his memory failing.
What Steve didn't know was scammers had been calling.
Over the course of the next several months, he got in deeper and deeper and deeper.
It had been tough for the Vietnam veteran turned engineer.
He was design engineer for diesel manufacturing company for many years. He got laid off in North Carolina. He moved here to North Dakota to try and start over. About 10 years ago, he had a stroke.
Michael lived alone in a mobile home. In his stroke, he found inspiration.
Even after the stroke, I mean, he authored 5 books, so he was still pretty busy. I'd see him 2-3 times a week, and we'd talk every day. You know, it was a pretty tight relationship. Like I said, he couldn't drive, so if he had errands to run, go to the bank or get groceries or something, I'd run him around town.
Many seniors never tell anyone, but Michael thought someone was stealing his money. So Steve brought him to the bank.
He thought somebody was taking money from his account. Well, somebody was. It was him. But he didn't remember that. And of course, the bank had records. They had his signatures.
Steve said he tried to stop the scammers.
He has 2 sons, one in Texas, one in North Carolina. They both talked to him. His friends talked to him. None of it did any good because he was so focused on the promise.
So he tried to take over his brother's bank accounts, his assets.
I started guardianship proceedings, okay, to try and find some way to protect him from himself. Those were still in the works when he killed himself.
The scammers sell their story to the isolated, but they're not against pitching their promise of millions to other people. People who don't seem to fit that profile. People who aren't ill. They're not alone. So how do they get sucked in? Scammed continues after the break. In their house in the middle of a forest in Florida, a tribute to a shared love.
We had to quit our hunting a couple of years ago. Huh?
What were you hunting?
Deer.
Deer? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I go in the living room. You'll see.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not paying attention.
Meet Barb and her husband, Bill.
He told me, he said before we got married, he said, I'm going hunting. On some weekends, long weekends, or vacation, and he said, you can either go with me or stay home, but I'm going. And I said, well, I'm going too. I'm a pretty good shot. He says I'm a better shot than he is.
Yeah, she's a better shot than me.
I got more patience than he does.
Yes.
I think's why he says I've got, because I can be patient enough to wait till I can get a shot. I won't shoot a deer if I don't think I can kill it.
A workplace romance.
The drive-up window of the telephone company is what I started out doing,
yeah.
Cashier. And I worked my way all the way through the business office till there was nothing more for me to do in the business office.
That blossomed into marriage.
We started going together, going to lunch, and so forth and so on, and here we are, 36 years later.
36 years, wow.
36 years later, it will be 36 in December.
From their union, 3 children. Now grandchildren. Bob's grandson is the proverbial apple of his grandmother's eye.
I'm so proud of him, I don't know what to do. He wanted to go to college, and they didn't know how they were going to send him to college.
And he first came to mind when someone called David Myers telephoned in October 2015. David Myers might well have been talking to Edna Schmitz.
And he said, I had won $2 million and a car.
He said she'd won Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
I called Publishers Clearinghouse, and I asked them if I had won a prize. And she said all she could tell me was I was on the list.
It was a con, but at the time, just what Barb wanted to hear.
So I took her at her word.
Millions were merely a small fee further. David Myers was charming.
He was very nice. In fact, he got to know us real well, and he, you know, he called me by my first name and he talked to Bill, called Bill by his first name, and he talked to us about hunting, getting to know us. And he even was going to bring his wife down here, and we were going to go out for lunch or dinner.
It started off simple enough.
We had money orders that we got from the post office.
100 here, a couple of hundreds there.
He would call once, twice, depending on what he was trying to talk us into doing. Because I'd keep saying to him, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And he'd call and he'd say, well, now remember, everything you're spending is going to be, you're going to be reimbursed for that.
David would reel them in.
And he says, when you get your money, he says you'll have money to pay, do whatever you want with the money you're going to get.
He'd drain them dry.
We cashed our CD, and I cleaned out my savings account, which was about, $10,000 in it. Cleaned it out. Had nothing left in it. We had a $21,000 investment with insurance company. I drew $7,000 out of that, trying to get money to pay him. He just convinced me that it was true, that I had won this.
But the millions weren't coming, so why were they sending money?
He said IRS would not allow him to deliver the price until the taxes were paid. And he said his company paid a part of the taxes, half of them, I think he said. And he tried, he said he had the car on the road, had the driver, and the car was on the road. They were bringing it to me and my money, and IRS stopped it, he said. They said no, they had to have the whole price to get it.
We even talked to one guy that supposedly was the truck driver bringing the car.
He gave you the number for someone?
He called us.
He called us. The truck driver called us to get directions.
People warned them.
Oh God, we went through Ocala. We went everywhere after we got stopped. The post office started questioning us. Walmart started questioning me, and then Fort McCoy refused. We went to Ocala to the post office in Ocala once, trying to send money.
There 2 times.
2 times to send money.
Why were they trying to stop you?
They didn't think it was right. They thought I was being taken advantage of, and I was. But I was to the point that I guess I was hoping he was telling the truth, and if I didn't finish paying for it, I wouldn't get my prize.
When their cash ran out, David asked about credit cards.
I tell him, I say, David, I haven't got any more money. You've got everything I got. Well, he say, you got credit cards? Well, who doesn't have? I said, yeah. You can borrow on those credit cards.
Yes.
Which we did.
But
Nice. Shouldn't have. On 2 of the credit cards, I'm still paying for them.
wow.
One of them, I've got it down to $6,000 right now.
One day, Barb was distraught when David called. Her daughter, as it later turned out, she didn't know then, was going to die.
I wanted to go to my daughter because I didn't know just how sick she was at the time, but she was sick. And I wanted to go to her. I finally got to her, but she died. He called me on my cell phone, and I was on my way to my daughter. I was in Georgia, and he wanted to know what was the devil was I doing in Georgia. And I told him I was going to my daughter. He says, well, where's the $3,000 money I was supposed to be getting?
It's been humiliating.
How does all of this make you feel?
Stupid. I should have known better. It's my fault. He kept him hauling around. He didn't. If it had been up to him, we wouldn't have done it. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
And I David got to me, and I wanted to help my kids. I wanted to let them, to see my kids in a place that they weren't trying to make ends meet before I die.
If anyone can relate to that upset, it's Norman Broadenbaugh.
It's just like with these scumbags that took everything from me. If I think about it, I think they're a bunch of daggone thieves and this, that, and the other thing, and I'd like to knock the living hell out of them.
The 84-year-old watched his wife get swindled, then die. Then he got swindled and lost his house. Home now is an assisted care facility in Baltimore. Norman and his late wife had been living about 10 minutes from here when the call came. It was 2005.
You please go because that is what they're waiting on right now, your package number, so your package could be verified, so the guys could take the money to you today.
The same pitch. Millions were coming after taxes.
It cost us $2,000 in taxes. And so she said, well, send it to him. So I did. So,
And you said that was the beginning.
yeah.
He then...
Then it just went on and on and on. Different ones called.
And calling and calling.
Oh, they called every day. And if I didn't answer it, they didn't like my answer, they'd call back in 5 minutes. They'd call you every 5 minutes. And if I wouldn't answer the phone, they would ring the phone right back. And they'd ring the phone for a half an hour.
It would just be ringing.
Yeah.
So
They'd call, and if I just get off the phone, and I'd hang up, they'd turn right around and call back.
His wife declining from dementia, medical bills escalating, the promise of a big payday slowly seemed the answer. The money never made it to Norman, but his money went to people all across the Union, a long list of names.
How much money did I want? There it is. Starts there. Those are all pages of people that called me and how much money I sent them. I lost probably somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. All my life savings, my house, my wife's savings, annuities and savings, my health insurance, life insurance, everything I could get money on. They had me hock my guns, and hock jewelry, anything. They get you a call and want me to hock anything I had in the house. Pawn it. I'd take it and pawn it because I figured they were going to send me this money. I'd get the damn stuff back.
So not female, not alone, at least not at the time, but still a victim. Why? How do the scammers find these people, and what makes them squander their life savings for nothing in return? Scammed continues after the break.
We spent much of today in Maryland and Baltimore talking not just to victims, but people whose relatives have been fleeced. And now we're headed to Philadelphia, that's about an hour and a half away, to speak with a professor who says the elderly are vulnerable not just because of generational and cultural issues, but also because of medical reasons. Now we've just arrived in Philadelphia. This is a pretty important interview as this professor has done pioneering work looking at exactly how the elderly are affected. The memory is affected as they grow older. Hi.
How are you? I'm Jason.
Archibald.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Sure. My name is Jason Karlowish. I'm a physician and I'm a professor of medicine, medical ethics and health policy and neurology at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm also the co-director of the Penn Memory Center.
That word, memory, is part answer to the central question of this piece. How could this happen?
As people just add years to life, first, they become more likely to develop diseases of the brain. Particularly after about the age of 70 or 75, older adults are more likely to develop a disease called Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease causes brain cells to die, and it leads to early troubles with making decisions, particularly financial decisions.
Professor Karlowish says after age 75, there's a 2% per year chance someone will develop dementia, and 1 in 5 people 80 years and older has, quote, some degree of cognitive impairment. In other words, they're not as sharp as they used to be.
In addition to the changes in judgment is the person's not learning and what's happening, and so they're forgetting the fact that they perhaps perceived that things were wrong with what they were hearing about. The scammer calls back, they've forgotten about the original call and the fact that that didn't sound right, so they're right back to where they started again.
Disease aside, their decision-making ability declines, especially over age 60.
It's not uniform, it's very variable, but when it occurs, people have difficulties making judgments. They're more likely to rely on their emotions than they on kind of the rational thought process. So more likely to rely on trust and good feeling and think this just feels good, let's go ahead and do it. It's somewhat similar to kind of the decision making that you see in adolescence in some sense.
And that may be why the con men call so much. Once again, Doug Shadell.
What you want to do if you're a con man is you want to get the victim under the ether. You want to get them into a heightened emotional state, excited. Because once that part of your brain is engaged, it can flood out the cognitive reasoning part of the brain. So all you're thinking about is that $10 million. Somebody calls you and says, you just won $10 million. You're not thinking, oh, is this a scam? You're thinking, how can I get the $10 million? And the heck with everything else.
And remember the words Edna, Barb, and Bill used to describe the men on the phone? Nice, charming. And you realize the scammed come to like the scammers.
What are some of the things that the scammers say to them?
Oh, this is, you just came back from church? I go to church too. Let's pray together. They will find what your emotional Achilles heel is and then go and squeeze it. And they're absolute masters at doing that. So the first interactions are really listening more than talking. They're asking people about their life and finding out how many grandkids they have and where they live and where they go to church. And that's all ammunition that they can use later when they need to extract money.
But plenty come to those conversations already armed with lists of just the right people. Lead lists, sometimes handwritten. Kevin Watson is from the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency, the Jamaican police agency investigating the lottery scams.
We have letter size or legal size. A typical letter size sheet of paper would contain probably the ones that I've seen contain about 40 unique identity information of persons, and this include, name, addresses, names, addresses, telephone numbers, social security numbers, and date of birth.
Lead lists are a basic weapon in the arsenal of the scammer. Bought, sold, traded, killed for.
You have those lead lists, extended lead lists, which would contain more information. It would contain things like the kind of assets that the persons own, the number of premises that the person have. It will have background on the family members of the persons and even sometimes the asset of the family members and so on. So a lottery scammer can get a good idea of the value of the victim.
The more detailed, the more valuable. top dollar for sweepstakes lists.
So normally with a sweepstake lead list or a coupon type lead list, the victim themselves are asked to fill out that form and probably send it in somewhere or enter it somewhere, and they are able, and they'll be entered in a sweepstake. These are the most convincing type, I believe, because they would normally remind the victims that, listen, you filled out this sweepstake form, you fill this out on whatever date, and we are now advising you that you are the winner of this sweepstake.
And this is mail Americans get on a daily basis, and Jamaican scammers somehow get their hands on. Which brings us to Linda with a suitcase full of sweepstake offers. Mail that started in 2011, directed at her 81-year-old mom, who lived alone and across the country from her. Her mother's neighbor pulled Linda aside on a trip to see her mother. Linda's mom was behaving odd, said the neighbor.
It seemed like she was mesmerized. It seems like she had to open the mail. It seemed like she had to enter sweepstakes. And then the phone calls started.
The warning came too late.
Because of the scammers, because of the criminals taking her money, she lost her car. She had to move away from her house. They took everything. Everything she had worked so hard to save. When she was 81 years old, they took everything. I think the people that do this think that they're clever, or they're smart, or they're special, or they're doing something good. But if you have to con a little old lady out of the money that she saved from her hard work, you're not special. You're not smart. You're not clever. You're a criminal.
Frank Innocenti and his daughter Diane Hayner were luckier. They were able to cut off the fraud before it escalated. Frank's wife, Madeline, was the target.
And then I got this call from Jamaica, and the guy says, "You have won $4 million. I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah." My wife, right away, she took her right up because, she always wants to get one of those contests. So he was talking back and forth, and he called daily. He wasn't, anytime we went to call, he says, "May I speak to Madeline, please?" I says, "Just a minute." I says, "Here's your friend again, Madeline."
An ex-cop, Frank, says he was suspicious from the start, but even so.
Did she tell you she was sending him money?
I had one with her. I mean, I had to go with her because now I drive, she don't drive anymore. I had to take her to Walmart to get money orders. I stopped, the only way I stopped her, like I said, I put all the envelopes in the shredder. That stopped her. When she said no, getting no more mail, I says, "No, you ain't getting any more mail." I said, "If you did, you ain't gonna see it because it's going in the shredder. You're not even gonna open the envelope." So that's how I stopped it.
All told, Madeline Innocenti lost about $3,500, far less than many of those defrauded. Money lost, relationships almost ruined.
She said, "What are you doing here?"
Madeline Innocenti's daughter, Diane Hayner.
And I looked at her and I said, "I'm trying to protect my parents." I said, "You need to understand this is a phone scam." "No, it's not. I'm going to get a car. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that." I said, "No, you're not, Mom." It was really hard for me to see my mother not willing to accept reality, and that's the only way I can put it at that point. It kind of started the War of the Worlds. I don't think my mother's ever forgiven me. Maybe, maybe not.
Doug Shadell says that kind of reaction is not uncommon.
The victim is embarrassed, doesn't want to talk about it. The loved one, a son or daughter, comes and tries to help them. They start hiding the money they're sending. It creates huge problems with the entire family structure. So they immediately try and block the rest of the world off, which further isolates the victim and makes it less likely they're going to report it, less likely they're going to ask for help, and more likely that the family will only find out after all the money is gone.
Some scammers use fear.
The Jamaican lottery scammers in particular are different than other lottery scammers. A normal scammer follows the path of least resistance. They'll call somebody up, and if they get money from them, great. If the person resists, they go on to the next person. The Jamaican scammer will call that person 100 times a day, leave voicemail messages saying, I'm going to come burn your house down, and physically threaten to kill them. This has made it, this is completely different. This is a level of aggressiveness and bullying that we've really never seen in scammers before.
But for most scammers, it's establishing rapport that seems to work oh so well. Vlad Rojo and Scott Horn work for the United States Postal Service in Florida and have seen the evidence firsthand. Vlad Rojo says a common misconception is that scammers ask for money up front.
It's not always a call right off the bat, hey, you've won $20 million and you got to send us money. Usually they develop a rapport. Usually they tell them you're in the running for a couple of $1 million and a brand new car, Mercedes-Benz, and we just need some information from you so that we can put you in the drawing and hopefully you will win. And they get a lot of information from these elderly victims. They really, what I say is they debrief them. They get their names, their addresses, their family history, if they're, their military service. I've seen them get all sorts of things. And then, they or someone else will call back saying, well, you've actually won now, but in order to win, you've got to make payments in order to get your payments, and you've got to pay taxes in advance, or you have to pay insurance fees, or you have to pay the attorneys who are going to work the paperwork for your winnings.
Scott Horn joined the Postal Inspection Service in 2005 after 20-plus years as a cop probing white-collar crime.
An identity theft victim, for instance, is a victim that wants you to catch their criminal. They tell you, someone stole my identity, found out who it is, I want to punish, I've had them say, kill this person, right? The Jamaican lottery scams are different in that the scammers in Jamaica build a rapport with their victims here in the States. The victims end up trusting the scammers. We've even had reports where they think they're actually in a physical, or not physical, but in a emotional relationship with the scammers. So to convince the victims that they are in fact true victims and that they are being taken advantage of and a crime is being committed against them, in my estimation and from my experience, sometimes is extremely difficult. I've talked to victims on the phone for 2-3 hours before they will even open up to me and begin to understand what they've gotten themselves involved with.
They've seen victims who put aside their own needs, like a retired ship captain they met in South Florida in the summer.
When we went to interview him, we're talking to him in his apartment, and it is blazing hot, and there are no lights on. The refrigerator is wide open, and I said, do you not have electricity? He said, no, I can't make my payment. But he was still picking up money. The day before, he had picked up money for the scammers, $300-400, and sent it. And they never even said, well, why don't you go ahead and pay your electric bill so you could be comfortable in your home. But they did pay his phone bill.
Vlad Rojo and Scott Horn are members of a joint U.S.-Jamaica task force that's been tackling the scam, the Jamaica Operations Against Telemarketing, JOLT. But how well is that working? Scammed continues after the break.
You know where the Walmart is?
Yeah.
So, agreeing that card is your claimer's card. So you're going to go tomorrow in the morning, then you're going to get 4. You're going to get 4 of those cards and wait on us there, okay?
Okay.
Edna, Norman, Barb, and Bill are victims of a scam experts say just isn't going away. In fact, if anything, the number of calls has grown.
Today, the problem is much, much bigger.
Monica Vaca is the Assistant Director of the Marketing Division in the Federal Trade Commission.
Now, back in 2007, we only had about 2,000 complaints about the Jamaican lottery scam. At that time, we noticed it. We thought it was a problem. We sent out an alert to consumers to be aware of it. Today, the problem is much, much bigger. In 2015, we had more than 59,000 complaints about
59,000 from 2,000.
Yes, 59,000 complaints in 2015 about the Jamaican lottery scam.
And were these complaints just from practically everywhere across the United States?
All across the country.
And this, even as the people on the front line of the fight celebrate progress. They cite the work of a joint U.S.-Jamaica task force called JOLT, set up in 2007. Scott Brown is the Deputy Assistant Director at the Homeland Security Investigations Division of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. His focus is illicit trade, travel, and finance.
Since the inception of JOLT, we've initiated 725 cases. It's been going for about 7 years, so about 100 cases a year. We have seized, since 2009, over $6 million, and that's just what we've seized. We do a lot of outreach to banks, to money service businesses, to the Western Unions, the MoneyGrams, and their like businesses, identifying them of these are what these types of transactions look like. They're blocking those transactions every day.
And there have been plenty of court cases, says Jonathan Olin of the U.S. Justice Department.
As of today, we have brought charges against nearly 100 different individuals in Jamaican lottery fraud cases, and there are more in the pipeline.
Deputy Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations in Miami, John Tobin, says there is other evidence JOLT is working.
I think with this type of activity, progress is always very incremental. So we have had some successes. Probably the biggest success has been the close collaboration we've had with the government of Jamaica. Our agencies working with Jamaican agencies, the rise or the modification of legislation in Jamaica to punish this, which was something that was a little bit of it was difficult at first, because when we came to the table, we realized very quickly there was a problem, and when we went to the legislation, we realized there was nothing to prohibit it.
The JOLT investigators say that cooperation has led to extraditions. They cite the case of Damian Barrett and Onique Barnett. The two were scamming an elderly person in the U.S. state of Wisconsin in a web that involved people in South Florida.
We didn't go for the biggest kingpin or the largest cases, because some of those cases are still being worked.
Once again, Blad Rojo.
This was a good, tidy case that was very prosecutable in both countries and was impactful. Setting the stage for them to be done, extraditions on these types of cases, and then hopefully for future extraditions to be done, but also to serve justice to the victims from the case.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Bertha Mitrani prosecuted the case.
The scammers in Jamaica felt because they were in Jamaica, they could do anything they want because they were untouchable. I think this was the first time they realized that they actually weren't untouchable, because the country of Jamaica takes these crimes as seriously as the United States, and we were able to work together.
But there has not been the flow of extraditions some officials would have liked.
When you put it together, it amounts to an estimated $300 million that is estimated has been lost. And at the height of this scam, 30,000 calls a day were being made from Jamaican boiler rooms into the United States.
Officials like Susan Collins. Collins is the U.S. Senator from the state of Maine. Since January 2015, she's chaired a Senate Special Committee on Aging that deliberated on the lottery scam, hearing often tearful testimony from victims, their family members, and friends.
More needs to be done, both by the Jamaican government and by our government here in the United States. Passing the laws the Jamaican government did was a good first step. I'd like to see more cooperation between our two governments to put an end to this scam once and for all. I think the best message that we can send, that this crime will not be tolerated, is to put the crooks in jail in this country.
And the senator is not the only one who says progress has been slow. Bob Blancato represents the Elder Justice Coalition, which has been at the forefront of the fight to get legislation passed to protect elderly Americans.
We passed legislation to fight child abuse 40 years ago. Yeah, we passed the Violence Against Women Act 20 years ago. It took till 2010 to get the Elder Justice Act passed, even though elder abuse continues to rise at a dramatic rate across the country.
Julian Robinson was a state minister under the PNP administration with specific responsibility for anti-lottery scam efforts.
I would say a lot has been done in the last 4 years. The act was passed, which led to a number of arrests and convictions of persons. The problem with lottery scamming is that it's one of these crimes that there's a very low barrier to entry, meaning all someone has to have is a computer with internet access. If they have what is called a lead list or a list of potential persons, then it's as simple as that. So it's a very hard type of criminal activity to track and to eliminate totally. But I'd say certainly in our administration a lot of strides have been made and the work is ongoing. I wouldn't say that we haven't done enough, but it's a major criminal activity which is easy to get into and which many people don't view as a crime. They view it almost as a way of trying to announce somebody out of their money. So the efforts of the police have been focused and I know gains have been made, but we can't ease up. We have to continue doing the work that has been started.
What are some of the specific steps you think that need to be taken going forward?
Well, I think the government is doing them already. The enforcement of the act is ongoing. For example, persons who are found in possession of things like lead lists can be arrested for those things, and I think that has made significant strides. But the reality is it is a tough crime to eliminate totally, and many persons are attracted to it because of the enormous economic gains that exist from it. So, it has to be continued to be tackled on the perspective of law enforcement, but also public education and to educate persons that this is in fact hard criminality. The majority of the crimes that take place in Western Jamaica are connected to the lotto scams, and quite frankly many lives have been lost because of persons who are not directly involved, but they are relatives or friends of persons who are involved, and we have paid a very heavy price in terms of the number of lives that have been lost.
Robert Montague is the new Minister of National Security.
Jamaica is doing what it can do and we are limited by our resources. We have partnered with the United States law enforcement agencies and we continue to enlarge and deepen that partnership. MOCA as an agency has gotten more funds to do more things, and I will not at this point in time go into the details of some of the strategies because we will not be signaling to the persons who we are targeting what are our strategies.
But the Jolt investigators say this is not a problem they can arrest their way out of. Once again, Blad Rojo.
Do we think we're going to stop it with one extradition? Do we think we're going to stop it with extraditing 20, 50 people? We don't think we're going to stop it, but we must do something and we must send the best message that we can. And I think it will deter some who may be cautious because more people are being arrested and sent to the United States, but I think it's also a direct deterrence to those who are perpetrating it. They continue receiving money, or we get to stop them.
Here's Scott Horn.
Definitely an uphill battle. Swimming against the tide, you may not get anywhere. But if we can get one or two people, and then hopefully if we can change that mindset, and then they attempt to change the mindsets of others, hopefully we can put a dent in it.
That mindset is why Jamaican authorities have launched a public education effort targeting schools. Kevin Watson of the Major Organized Crime Investigation Division, MOCA, says getting to young people before the scammers do is critical.
And I have spoken to quite a number of young children who have expressed, outright that they want to become scammers. They wanted to become scammers. When you ask them why, they would tell you that lottery scammers have the nicest car, they have the biggest houses, they are always partying, and so on.
Officials say the message needs to get out that the scam is devastating lives.
I would say to any Jamaicans who are involved in this scam, to think of your own parent or grandparent and think how you would feel if this happened to them. In particular, think about what the impact is on low-income elderly citizens who are struggling to get by. And because they're trusting, because they don't suspect that this is a scam, give away the money that they need for food, for heat, for medicine to live on. And I hope that that affects your conscience. And if you're involved in these kinds of criminal activities, that you will renounce them and give it up immediately.
U.S. Senator Suzanne Collins.
This is a crime that devastates people, it devastates families, and it's like financial kidnapping, it's like financial murder, it's like financial rape. It is serious, it is hurtful, it is evil, it is criminal.
That was Linda, the daughter of a scam victim. You have been listening to Scammed. I am Archibald Gordon. Thanks for listening.